I would see Kansas City as a team being on the outside looking in.
That's spicy.
Gardner Minshew is the best backup in the NFL.
I love Gardner. Welcome to another episode of 30 Minutes of Football with Legit Football. I am your host, Brian McFadden. As we do here, we're not going to waste a lot of your time. We're just going to jump right into the football talk. Training camps have begun. There's actual football happening. All this off-season talk, all this news that we break on Legit Football. There's an actual game that we can talk about. My guest this week, very excited to have Federico Holguin of Phantasia Sports. Federico, welcome to 30 Minutes of Football.
Thank you for having me, Brian. I'm really excited just to talk some football. This is fun.
That's the whole point of this. It's just honest. It's an excuse for me to just get together with some awesome people and just talk NFL for 30 minutes. So quick recap of the format. We will be on a timer. We will have exactly 30 minutes to have various NFL questions that we will throw at each other. You have not shared your questions with me. I have not shared my questions with you. We'll have a quick break for halftime, and then we will speed right to the finish. Are you ready to get this party started?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Great. 30 minutes of football with Legit Football starts now.
Perfect. So I'll get started with the first question, if you don't mind.
Please.
So today, what do you make of that contingency on Kyler Murray's contract that he must complete 4 hours of independent study?
That's crazy.
Due to his poor study habits? What is your perspective on that?
My biggest takeaway from that is so as a recap, there was a clause in Kyler Murray's contract with the Arizona Cardinals stating that as a stipulation, he was required to complete 4 hours of independent film study and something along the lines of basically if he didn't, he couldn't play video games to detract from that. It's definitely something I've never seen in a contract, but here's my take from that. This has obviously been an issue. You do not put words like that in a contract that will be going public. This is not the kind of thing in the NFL, everything is for public eyes. You knew this was going to get out and you were comfortable saying, hey, this is our, $46 million quarterback, and he's got a video game problem, and he doesn't study. He's actually been quoted previously saying that he doesn't study because he just has a feel for the game, and he just wants to get in there. To me, what would Peyton Manning have given that answer? Does Tom Brady give that answer? No, these are guys who got to the top of their game and become legends in the sport because of the extra time that they spend studying their own game film, studying opponents, studying tendencies, becoming as absolute a best player as you can at the most important position in sports. So that's my biggest takeaway there. Besides the fact that it was surprising that it actually existed, was that why was Arizona compelled to put it in the first place? To me, that tells me that this is maybe one of the reasons they weren't so quick to sign him right away. I mean, they kind of had to. We addressed this last week. There was no alternative. I mean, you got Kyler Murray, you have to sign him. But to put that in there, that's concerning. And that's certainly something to monitor. Is this a guy that can change his behavior just because he got a big deal? Is this something that he's now, going into his fourth year in the league? Is this something that, can you change your habits at this stage? So what are your quick thoughts on the Kyler?
Right. First and foremost, I wonder, how does something like this get out? Who wins when a story like this? I am completely sure that Kyler Murray and his camp doesn't want this story out at all. Especially there's been a lot of off-season drama between him and the organization as it is. But I guess my question is, why give that amount of money to a quarterback that you have questions about if you still have him under contract? Mm-hmm. Which is why, and I get that the Cardinals were kind of in a hard spot. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. You can't let him go, but you do have some questions regarding his character, regarding his leadership. He's improved every year. He's a 2-time Pro Bowler. I think he kind of sneaked in last year. I think you could have gave it to Matthew Stafford towards the end of the year, but he led them to an 11-win season. There are some questions. The Cardinals always tend to zizzle out towards the end of the season. Mm-hmm. We don't know if that's really due to the coach. We don't know if that's a leadership problem. I guess it's just I ponder why Arizona would be so quick to give him the contract extension if you have so many questions regarding his character, especially because he was still under contract before they gave him the money.
Well, I think it's an out. It's almost like, and they were okay making this public. So if they ever needed to get out of it, they could say, hey, look, we put it in there.
Right.
Everybody knows that we put it in there. You didn't hold up your end of the bargain, Kyler, so we're not going to stick to this 5-year extension. We're going to go ahead and cut it. I don't know what other reason they would do it, because like you said, it was going to get public. We knew it was going to get public. They knew it was going to get public. They have to be comfortable with that, meaning they want to use this as an out. Like, that's the only thing I can think of is if Kyler continues his, let's say, video game habit ways, 4 hours a week is not that much. I mean, Peyton Manning probably did 4 hours in the morning, right? Like every single day. So it's not a big requirement. And if he's not even able to meet that, that could be the Cardinals' way of saying, yeah, this guy's definitely not for us. Hey, you broke your end of the contract. We're now able to get out of it. Would be interesting to monitor. That's for sure. I've never seen any that kind of language in a contract before. I'm going to turn it back over to you. So I had to start with the fantasy question. You work for a fantasy football app, and we'll definitely hear more about that at halftime. Who do you like as the best potential rookie running back in fantasy? Who are you kind of eyeing, like this guy, whether it's opportunity, whether it's talent? Who do you like as the best rookie fantasy running back?
I haven't really given, like, it's so specific because you said running back.
Yeah.
But I guess like the only one that I'm really familiar with is Drake London from USC.
Wide receiver. Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about just running backs.
Running back, yeah. Do you have a running back you're eyeing? Like a lot of people.
I don't, not specifically for running backs, no.
Okay.
I think Drake London. I think he's going to be really good.
Sure. Look at pivot to wide receiver. Tell me why you think Drake London is going to be good then.
I think that this was a heavy wide receiver class. Like, how many wide receivers went on the first round? I think like 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always kind of watched the Pac-12. Like, that's kind of like the division in college football what I've always watched. And I don't know. I think he's really talented. I think he's a natural like route runner. I think he has really good hands. I think that he comes from like an offensive system that will fit really well with like a West Coast offense in the NFL. I think he's a baller. I think he's really good. Do you have anybody in mind, like fantasy-wise, a running back that you think would excel this year?
Yeah, quickly on the Drake London thing. I mean, his opportunity is the biggest benefit to him. There is no other wide receiver that they're throwing to. Brian Edwards, who was recently with the Raiders, is their only other kind of viable wide receiver. Kyle Pitts is essentially their wide receiver one, even though he's a tight end. Yeah. So I definitely like London's profile. He got a lot of comparisons to Mike Evans coming out of college. He was heavily utilized at USC. This is not a guy who was just a red zone target. He had some games where he was getting 15 targets a game. So he has shown the ability to be a solid wide receiver one. But it's also because there's only so many targets to go around in Atlanta. I think he's going to get fed early and often. In a team that's probably going to be playing from behind a lot. Atlanta, not one of the best rosters, certainly has some deficiencies on the defensive side of the ball. Be curious to see how Mariota does. Maybe they bring Desmond Ridder in. But I like London at his opportunity. I'm actually going to stay with Atlanta. And I've mentioned this on this podcast before, but this is kind of my ride or die this year, and that's Tyler Algier. So here's a running back who went to BYU, did not initially receive a scholarship. He actually walked on to BYU. He had some Division II scholarships, and he felt that he was good enough to play Division I. Guy was working at Walmart while playing, and he also played some linebacker early on at his time at BYU. So to me, that's as a guy who's willing to put in the work. He's a hard worker. He's willing to climb up the ranks and prove himself. And he doesn't necessarily have the top end speed of a Derrick Henry, but he's very much a bruising running back. One of the best in the NCAA at broken tackles. One of the top in as far as total yardage, rushing yardage over the past 2 seasons with BYU. And he's going into a Falcons offense whose head coach was the offensive coordinator for Derrick Henry in Tennessee and Arthur Smith. So I just think he fits that profile. There's been a lot of reports that Cordero Patterson, who was essentially the running back one last year, they don't want to have him carry the load as much at running back. They want to use him more at wide receiver because, as we just mentioned, Federico, they don't have a lot of wide receiver targets anyway. So you move Patterson out to wide receiver, and you've got a guy like Tyler Algier who's got the work ethic, who's got the build, and is already kind of has that chip on his shoulder and has been able to prove himself in these situations where he wasn't just an obvious, highly recruited talent. I just think he's got that opportunity, especially from a fantasy perspective. Even if they just use him in goal line, he's a guy who can get you some short yardage, get you some goal line. If you're looking for a late round flyer, I'm not saying he's going to be the best fantasy running back, but he's the guy I kind of planted my flag on. The obvious answer for that is really Breece Hall. As far as talent and opportunity, I think that we're already looking at him getting the lion's share of the running back carries and touches in New York. Part of that Mike LaFleur offense, who comes from the Shanahan tree, where the running game is big and just getting a lot of touches there. So I mean, the obvious answer is the answer who will probably end up being true, and that's Breece Hall. So the ball is now back on your side of the field, Federico. You may ask the next question.
Yes, let's go. So where do you think like Garoppolo ends up, right? Because it's an interesting question. Like Kyle Shanahan, he's not even alluding to anymore. He's kind of pretty much stating directly, like, we're going to go with Trey Lance going forward this season, right? And like 2-3 weeks ago, I would have told you I can see Garoppolo ending up like in the Panthers. Then they made that trade for Baker Mayfield. It doesn't really make sense. They still have Darnold on the roster. Maybe Seattle, maybe the Giants. They have a new offensive coach, someone who's not really affiliated with Daniel Jones. Maybe that's a good fit for him. But, like, I don't really see a market for him out there right now, unfortunately. Like, where do you see Jimmy G ending up, like, once it's all done?
This is something that has continued to come up on the show for a good reason.
Yeah.
And, yes, I would have pegged Carolina as the obvious choice, but now that Baker's there, that's off the table. Seattle keeps coming up. I just can't see the 49ers trading him to an in-division rival in the Seahawks, and I don't think it makes sense for them to cut him. If they don't find a trade partner, you've got a guy who's taking you to the Super Bowl. He can be there as a backup to Trey Lance. You're right. Shanahan actually said in a press conference earlier today that like Lance is our guy. We like Jimmy, but he will probably be on another team. So that's the plan. Apparently there have been 4 or 5 teams who are interested. If we had to speculate, I'm going to call out Loco Monkey Sports in the chat. He said he thinks he lands in Miami. I actually don't think that's far-fetched. So you got his former offensive coordinator and Mike McDaniel is now the head coach in San Francisco. You got Teddy Bridgewater there, but McDaniel has familiarity with Jimmy G, and if he's got going in all these weapons with Tua, but if Tua gets injured or if Tua is not quite up to standard with all this improvement on the offensive line and the weapons around him, McDaniel might be more likely to go with a guy he's familiar with Jimmy Garoppolo, than with a guy with Teddy Bridgewater. So the key is the contract. So nobody's going to pay Jimmy Garoppolo $25 million to be a backup quarterback. So either he has to get cut or the 49ers have to eat a portion of that. Do they get enough back in trade compensation to justify eating, let's say, half of the contract? So then he's only at 12 or 13 million, which is still a lot for a backup quarterback. It might be, at the end of the day, the best fit is just to keep him as a backup. Now, I'm a regular on the 49ers Rush podcast, and that's where John Chapman, the host of that show, sits. He thinks that he should be a backup quarterback with the Niners, because if they don't get enough back in return for him, it doesn't make sense to cut him. He could just end up in San Francisco. I've heard Houston too, but I don't know that makes a whole lot of sense. I don't think Houston's in a spot where they would want to compete, so why bring in a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo, see what you have in Davis Mills, and see where that goes. All right, we've got 3.5 minutes left. I'm going to ask you a pretty straightforward question. Should be about a 3-minute question. And it's simple. Will the Los Angeles Rams make it back to the Super Bowl, defending Super Bowl champs? Not asking if they're going to win it, but do you think they will make it back to the big game in 2022?
You know what? Just off the top of my head, I'm going to say yes, because who else is there really? Like the Packers, I think they're going to kind of have a little bit of a down year without Devontae Adams. They kind of have to figure out their offense. I'm a big Aaron Rodgers fan, but I don't know how committed he really is to the game. The reason Devontae Adams left to begin with was because he kind of got some context that Aaron Rodgers wouldn't be playing for too much longer. Tampa Bay, they lost Gronkowski. I don't see anybody else in the NFC that stands out to me for me to say, yeah, they can beat the Rams.
What about the Bucks? We got Tom Brady is behind our timer here.
I know it's you never want to bet against Brady, right? You never want to bet against Brady. So I want to watch what I say, but I would still have the Rams as a slight favorite. Okay. I just think that as a team, it's not the same team. The Buccaneers are not the same team. I think Gronkowski, the interior line is not the same. I just see the Rams as the favorites in the NFC until I see something that shows me otherwise. I don't have a reason not to pick the Rams this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's between them and the Bucs. You've got, and maybe the 49ers. If Trey Lance makes a jump, that's really the biggest missing piece. They have some questions, San Francisco does, in the interior of their offensive line, but their defense is already one of the best in the league. They've got one of the best linebackers, maybe the best linebacker in Fred Warner. They've got one of the best pass rushes with Nick Bosa there. They upgraded their defensive backs. Charvarius Ward now is their number one cornerback. They got a solid safety in Jimmy Ward. And you got Kyle Shanahan calling the plays. So I think the biggest just question mark there is Trey Lance. So I can see San Francisco competing. But you're right, the NFC is much more wide open. The Rams have a much clearer path to the Super Bowl than the Bengals do, or any AFC team does, where there could be 12 or 13 teams competing for a playoff spot. So yeah, I believe if I have the Rams going as well, I don't have them winning. I have the Bills beating them. But I purposely phrased the question, will they make it back? It's very difficult to make it back, and it's even harder to win back-to-back Super Bowls. With just under a minute left, do you have a quick question that you can get in before halftime?
Quick prediction for the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, so I still think they'll win that division. I don't think they're going to go like 13-4 again. I don't think they're going to have 13 win seasons. I think losing Devontae Adams is going to be a lot bigger maybe than people think. That's not a knock on Rodgers. Rodgers is still one of the most physically gifted quarterbacks maybe the league has ever seen. I do think they'll go more run heavy. They do have a very good defense, especially a secondary, and Rashawn Gary really coming on the line last season. But I just think you're not going to have – he's always kind of had that guy that's been his go-to, right? Whether it's Jordy Nelson, whether it was Randall Cobb for a while, whether it was obviously Devontae Adams for many years. And we mentioned this on my last show last week. There were games where he would just lock into Adams, and you're not going to have that kind of blanket. He's going to be relying on an Alan Lazard as your wide receiver one and a bunch of unprovens. So I think they make the playoffs. I think they win the North, but I don't think they make it to the Super Bowl. All right, that is our halftime chime. See these go by quickly, Federico. We got to be ready, just like a real NFL game. So shout out to everybody who came and listened. If you haven't already, make sure to check out Legit Football. All you got to do is go to legitfootball.com, hit join. It is 100% free. Get your daily morning briefing, 5 minutes or less. Get caught up on the NFL. This is the best time to join because we're covering all the training camps. You want to have the training camp nuggets, which rookies are excelling, who's getting first team snaps, what are the injury updates. We're going to get all of that to you with Legit Football. 100% free, 5 minutes a day. Get caught up, legitfootball.com, and join. Enter your email address. Simple as that. Federico, why don't you let everybody know a little bit more about Phantasia Sports? Sure.
Phantasia is the future of fantasy sports, offering daily contests and season-long leagues. Phantasia features a unique season-long fantasy football concept known as commissioner-less leagues, which will securely collect, lock up, and pay out your league dues automatically at the end of the season. Users can create and join leagues to enjoy 0% fees and instant payouts. This is a revolutionary model that no other season-long fantasy football platform offers. Join Phantasia today at phantasia.app.
There you go. And we've got their Twitter handle on the screen at Phantasia Sports. Make sure to follow them. They are the future of fantasy football. You're talking Web3, you're talking NFTs. That's where you want to be in general in the world. They actually are incorporating that in the fantasy football. So make sure to check out Phantasia Sports. If you are a subscriber of Legit Football, you've already seen some messaging from them in today's email. I'm looking forward to working with them some more. All right, I have done my halftime speech. We've hydrated, we've stretched. Federico, are you ready for the second half here?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Great. So I will ask you about the Jaguars running back situation. So we had a story today for James Robinson. He will not go on the PUP list. So he tore his Achilles late last season. And I think that's very promising that it shows he's not ready to practice, but he's not going to go on the PUP list, physically unable to perform, meaning he's very close to an actual return. You got Travis Etienne, who missed all of last season, highly touted first-round rookie. He's finally going to get a chance to see his first game action. There's been a lot of reports that he's going to be utilized a lot. James Robinson, prior to last season, ended as RB7. So you've got these two hyper-talented running backs. One has already proven himself before he got injured in the NFL. One is kind of a little bit more speculation. Do you have a prediction for how Jacksonville is going to use these two running backs? Do you have a prediction about how this is going to play out?
I have absolutely no prediction simply because Jacksonville is so unpredictable. Like, wasn't Travis Etienne didn't come out from college as a wide receiver, if I'm wrong?
No. So it's kind of the opposite. He was a running back at Clemson.
And they had him playing wide receiver.
But Urban Meyer, now, and that's important to note, it's an entirely different coaching staff. Doug Peterson is the new head coach there, but Urban Meyer and that one and done, crazy, chaotic staff from last year was planning on using him as a wide receiver. He was lining up last camp primarily as a wide receiver. But I don't know if we can take that as precedent because it's a whole new coaching staff. They have said that they want to use him in kind of like a hybrid role. Think like Deebo Samuel, Cordero Patterson, where they've got him at running back. They do have him at receiver as well. I don't know if you've used James Robinson in past fantasy leagues. Do you have a preference? Let's say we'll rephrase it. Let's say you're going into a fantasy draft. Who are you targeting first, James Robinson or Travis Etienne?
I would say Travis Etienne because I think that he has more potential. But knowing Doug Peterson as an Eagles fan, the way that he utilizes his running backs, he tends to have them in rotation. He never really has a three
like a workhorse.
Like a workhorse. Like he usually likes to have a rotation of running backs to carry the ball. So really, like if I was playing fantasy, I would avoid both of them just simply because of that. Because Doug Peterson's running back rotations are very, very unorthodox. They kind of derive from running back coach Deuce Staley. I think he's in Detroit now as an offensive coach. So it's hard to say. It's Jacksonville. They're very unpredictable. Doug Peterson himself is an unpredictable play caller. It's really hard to gauge how they're going to utilize these running backs that they have in rotation.
So you picking Etienne first, is that a reflection of the fact that he's going to get some wide receiver? Maybe in PPR leagues, he might be subject to more pass down usage. Is that kind of why you're?
I'm imagining that Doug Peterson is going to utilize him more in a traditional running back style rather than the way that Coach Myers envisioned it last year.
Right. So
that's why.
But you like his talent. I'm just trying to nail you down. Like, what makes you like Etienne slightly over Robinson? Is it because you think his talent level is a little bit better?
I think his ceiling is higher. Gotcha. Essentially, I think he has a higher ceiling.
Okay. Yeah. I think it's definitely worth monitoring. I have James Robinson in one of my dynasty leagues, so selfishly, I'd like to see Robinson have a more successful season. I think there'll very much be a timeshare. I think Doug Peterson's smart, like you said, and he's going to use a rotation. It doesn't make sense for a talented guy like Robinson to not get utilized much. As I mentioned, he was actually RB7 2 seasons ago. This is a guy who can be one of the best running backs in the league, especially from a fantasy perspective. And if they are going to use Etienne in more of a hybrid role, you might see more actual carries go to Robinson. So maybe standard leagues lean a little bit more Robinson and PPR leagues lean a little bit more Etienne.
I agree.
All right. Yep. Ball is back on your side of the field. You may ask the next question.
Okay, so we actually kind of spoke about this a little bit off camera, but which former Alabama quarterback will take the biggest leap this season? We're talking about Jalen Hurts, Tua, which I know is your guy, and Mac Jones. So who do you think has the biggest leap this season?
Biggest leap. So it's an the way you phrase that question. So Mac Jones, I don't know, is going to make a huge leap. He actually started off pretty solid last year. I'm not down on him personally, but I think that Patriots offense is going to be very run heavy. Bill Belichick still hasn't stated who's going to be calling the plays in New England. So I just think he's not going to have the opportunity or the statistics to be quantified as a huge leap. I think Jalen Hurts has the biggest opportunity because I just really like the way that Eagles roster is built. And maybe this is a homer pick, but at the end of the day, I'm going to say Tua. Mainly because I think Hurts is already, especially from a fantasy perspective, he was quarterback one for a number of weeks last season, whereas Tua, most people are out on him. So I think here's the biggest potential for actual increase. If he's able to utilize his weapons, you got Cedric Wilson, you got Tyreek Hill, you got an upgraded offensive line with Connor Williams and Tevin Armstead. If he can stay healthy, one of the best left tackles in the league, everything is there, and he's already got a very strong defense. So I think the Tua narrative around him is that a lot of people have already kind of given up. Nobody's really given up on Jalen Hurts yet. So I think the opportunity is there for Tua to make a big jump. If this McDaniel offense works, if he's able to work as a head coach, that could be I'm going to put my chips on Tua. Maybe that's a little bit of a Dolphins pick. But I have Jalen Hurts in a dynasty league, so I kind of have both. But the one thing I'm most definitive is that I think Mac Jones will be solid. He will be efficient. He will work well in that now Josh McDaniels-less Patriots offense. But I wouldn't say he's going to have a huge leap because I don't think there's going to be an opportunity for him to have a huge leap. Did that make sense?
That makes sense.
What's your take? Quick.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. Like, I think the way that the Patriots system is built, it doesn't like really provide a situation for Mac Jones to shine, like statistically or even aesthetically. Like, that's kind of why they drafted Mac Jones to begin with, right? Like, they wanted a smart guy who could run the offense. It's not a guy that's going to be taking like big leaps season from season. I think between Tua and Hurts, it's like a coin toss. I guess it really has a lot to do, like you said, how that Daniels offense runs. Like, if it's efficient, if the people buy into the offense, and if they can incorporate all the new talent that they brought into the offense, like Tyreek Hill. I think Tua has shown in college that he's an accurate passer, like he can ball. So I think statistically, like you said, you brought up a good point, which is like Jalen Hurts. A lot of people believe in Jalen Hurts, but a lot of people are out on Tua. Mm-hmm. So just because of that, I think that by naturally, like organically, Tua is kind of prone or in a position to make a bigger splash this season because there's smaller expectations to begin with.
And this is a guy who, you mentioned his time in college. He was very much like a point guard style. I've likened him to a Drew Brees. And the problem is he's always been compared to Burrow and Herbert, who are just these absolute carry you on your back quarterbacks. That's never really been Tua, but he's operated great when he's had great protection, like that Alabama offensive line, and he was throwing to 3 or 4 first-round wide receivers. Well, he's got both of those things now. Now is your time to shine, Tua. I am going to ask you an Eagles question because I know you're an Eagles fan. I had to get at least one Eagles question in here. And we're going to keep it fantasy related. Will Miles Sanders be a top 12 running back at the end of the season? So that, for most leagues, 12 teams, that makes you a running back 1. Does Miles Sanders end up as an RB1 top 12 fantasy wide receiver at the end of the year?
Look, any Eagles fan would tell you he should have been that last year if Nick Sirianni would have ran the ball. But Nick Sirianni learned to run the ball like week 10, week 11. He finally discovered what worked, what everyone could already see worked. I think he will. I think Miles Sanders, he's a baller. He just didn't get enough touches. Last season, truly, he just didn't get touches. And we also gave a lot of touches to our third round running back that we drafted last year. I think his name is Kenneth Gainwell. We had a story on him today's Legit Football, how he's expected to get even more touches. So right, because he's very talented as well. That's the thing. We have a good running back rotation. Boston Scott, as we know, the Giants killer, as we call him. But so it's hard. For that reason, it's a little hard, right? Because there's so many options offensively. And you also have to spread the ball out to Devontae Smith. Now we have A.J. Brown, Quez Watkins, which these are names that you're going to hear throughout the season. But so it's hard, but I think so. I think that if Sirianni is smart and he gives him the ball, there's no reason why Miles Sanders shouldn't be a top 12 fantasy football running back. There's just no reason.
There is a reason. I think he has the potential to be and the talent to be. I'm not a believer in Sirianni. I think he had some questionable play calling last year, especially towards the beginning of the season, but even towards the end in that playoff game against the Bucs. Granted, they were behind pretty early, but I'm just worried that he'll want to just air it out. And he kind of did that the early last season where he just basically had Jalen Hurts running around making plays. They kept getting behind, and then Hurts would have to just kind of scramble around and improvise. And I'm worried that he won't get the opportunity to build up the stats that it would take to be a top 12 fantasy running back. And you do have guys like Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell. So that's my concern is really with Sirianni. How is he going to utilize those running backs? Should he be a top 12 running back, Federico? I completely agree.
I think he should be. Yeah.
I'm not putting my money that he will be. So just over 5 minutes left. Next question goes to you.
So it's very simple. Who wins the NFC East?
I've got Philly. I think it's clear that Washington and the Giants are just not in the conversation. Look, that NFC East is crazy. Every year there's been a different winner for 18 straight seasons, so I'm not going to sit here and say it couldn't happen. Maybe Daboll instantly recaptures his magic from coaching up Josh Allen and turns Daniel Jones into a quarterback beyond anything we've seen. I don't believe that'll happen. Maybe it does. Maybe Washington captures their magic from 2 seasons ago where they were a preseason darling last year before looking really bad. Maybe Carson Wentz comes in and finally finds the fit that he's been looking for. Also not likely. So it's really between Dallas and Philadelphia. One of those teams, Dallas, got much worse from a roster perspective. You traded away Amari Cooper, who's now with Cleveland. Cedric Wilson is gone. La'el Collins is gone. Connor Williams is gone. So they really lost a lot and didn't add a lot on the offensive side of the ball. I put up a poll yesterday. Who's going to get more fantasy points between Tony Pollard and Zeke Elliott? And both on LinkedIn and on Twitter, overwhelmingly Tony Pollard. But do they use him like that? I think they're putting too much in Zeke. He might take away from some of that opportunity. So I don't think their offense is as good. Obviously, Micah Parsons is a transcendent talent, but a lot of that defensive success last year was due to turnovers, which is kind of hard to predict year to year. So I've got a regression for Dallas. And Philadelphia on the other side of the ball, even though I'm not a Sirianni fan, man, Howie Roseman did a great job adding talent, both in the draft, Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, and in trading and signing. You got James Bradbury opposite Darius Slay. You've got A.J. Brown as a further weapon on that offense. Devontae Smith doesn't have to get all the attention. They already have a top 10, if not top 5 offensive line with Mailata and Lane Johnson. It's just they've got all the pieces there. I think it's theirs to lose.
I agree. Brian, is there another question you want to ask me real quick?
Oh, yeah. I've always got questions. We've got 3.5 minutes left. Is there a coach across the league, it can be one or multiple coaches, that you would say is on the hot seat? Who do you think is a coach that, like, this season is crucial, and if they don't actually have success, they could either be close to or losing their job this time next year?
Wow, I'm going to give you, like, a surprise answer.
Oh, okay, good.
Mike McDaniels. I think he's on the hot seat.
Oh, wow. You think it's one and done? Okay.
Actually, I mean, it depends, because they could always kind of use Tua as scapegoat. So you could say, like, hey, this isn't the quarterback that he drafted. Let's see another season. Let's have another look with a new quarterback. McCarthy, somebody wrote in the chat as well, McCarthy. But I don't know. I feel like McCarthy's safe. McCarthy's like best pals with Jerry Jones. And Jerry, what he wants is someone to control. He wants someone to essentially tell him what to do, and that person will listen. And, like, McCarthy is that guy. I say Mike McDaniels. I think, like, Miami, with the allegations that they threw their way, that they were trying to tank on purpose.
Sean Payton has been linked to them.
Sean Payton has been linked to them as well. Exactly. The Tom Brady. I don't know. Like, I feel like they could get him out if it just goes terribly wrong this season, like just terribly wrong. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they got him out. I do think, like, probably a year makes sense to give him an extra year. But that's going to be, like, my hot take for today. I think McDaniels actually has a lot of pressure for this season coming up because they have all the offensive talent. Mm-hmm. The division isn't particularly strong. I guess the Bills are strong. The Patriots are kind of always there. But it's now or never, for the Dolphins. And I feel like the organization, the fan base feels it. They're kind of ready to give up on Tua. So we'll see how it goes. I would say Mike McDaniels. I know it's kind of like a hot take.
It's not it's not as hot. I don't think they would, but I could see a scenario where that could be. I mean, like you said, this is a team that clearly McDaniel wasn't the first choice. They were trying to set up some crazy scenario where Brady was the quarterback and Peyton was the coach, and it didn't happen. And then they're like, oh, well, we fired Brian Flores. Now let's find somebody else. So I don't think it's as crazy. I think Matt Rule, to me, is the obvious choice as far as on a coach on a hot seat. I just think if he doesn't make it to the playoffs or he doesn't win at least 9 games, he's out. All right, so we got just over a minute left. Any questions left on your side?
I think that's pretty much all I had, Brian.
All right, so I'm going to ask you one last pick then. Who's a sleeper in fantasy drafts? Any position? Who are you kind of targeting? Who do you think is one of those players that could outperform their ADP, their average draft position? And you feel free to give me multiple names with 45 seconds.
Who? I'm gonna throw your name out there. I think Aaron Jones, running back for the Green Bay Packers.
Is a sleeper. Okay, explain.
Sleeper.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I know he's projected to go like top 15, top 20 in fantasy right now because like the Packers, they just got rid of Devontae Adams. It seems to be shifting towards a more run-oriented offense, at least for this season. But not a lot of people know who he is. And I think that last year, a lot of people like Skip Bayless, a lot of like journalists, they were even saying like he kind of ran the offense at times, AJ Jones. Like he was kind of like a safe guy do you remember what Eddie Lacy was for Aaron Jones a couple of years ago? Do you remember Eddie Lacy? I think that's what Aaron Jones can kind of be for Aaron Rodgers now.
Okay.
Essentially kind of like a go-to back. Like you need 3 to 4 yards, you got it. And I think
the game is up. The game is up. Fourth quarter, timer's up. You were close to the end zone and you came just short. So yeah, we try to stick to that timer. But great points, Federico. Thank you so much for coming on. Post-game press conference. How do you think your team performed today?
I think we did okay. There's always room for improvement, but
there you go.
We live and learn.
Get back, watch the tape, get back, improve. try some new things in practice. Well, Federico, thank you so much for joining. Make sure to check out Phantasia Sports. You can find them on social at Phantasia Sports. That's PH for those listening. And make sure to download their app if you want to get to the future of fantasy football platforms. Phantasia Sports is where it's at. Thank you so much for listening. We will not have a show this coming Friday, but we will be right back at next Tuesday. We are going to have Ari Meirov, insider for PFF, NFL insider Ari Meirov will be our guest next Tuesday, so make sure to check us out. As always, go check us out on all of the social media. Sign up for Legit Football, legitfootball.com, and we will see you next Tuesday. Thanks, guys.
I would see Kansas City as a team being on the outside looking in.
That's spicy.
Gardner Minshew is the best backup in the NFL.
I love Gardner.